live on Sky News Australia. The Rita Panahi Show.
Welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. We've got a massive program for you tonight ahead of the first of the hostage releases from Gaza. We'll cross to Israel to speak to Douglas Murray. Closer to home, we'll look at the chilling words of teenagers marching against Israel. And Michael Kroger will be here to discuss the latest news from the only Conservative at the ABC quitting the national broadcaster to New Zealand's centre-right coalition taking form. And the great survivor of Melbourne's gangland war, the irrepressible Mick Gatto, will join me in the studio. As always on Friday nights, I'll bring you Lefties Losing It, and I've heard your many complaints. The segment will be extended tonight. And later in the hour, the latest from satirical cartoon series, Please Explain.
Hi, I'm just a handsome boy called Anthony Albanese, and when I'm not stuck being the Prime Minister of Australia, I'm travelling the world non-stop. Welcome aboard Airmarked Albo, my travel vlog, and this is episode 18.
Sorry, Albo, responsibility calls.
But first, New South Wales underperforming Police Minister Yasmin Catley has put her foot in it again. You'll recall her less than admirable performance concerning anti-Semitic protesters that had the Jewish community up in arms. She's under pressure with calls for her resignation or sacking, with allegations she made misleading remarks about the death of Claire Nowland. And she now stands accused of inciting climate activists to block the world's largest coal port, the port of Newcastle. The Daily Telegraph reports protesters will spend 30 hours this weekend in canoes and kayaks on the water, blocking shore access to ships that are carrying coal. So what is the Police Minister's response to that? This is what Yasmin Catley had to say. I applaud people for getting involved. I think it's important that people are having these discussions. We all know where things are headed. What an utterly irresponsible response. I'll be talking about that with Ian Plimer a little later in the program. But before that, we again saw students protesting against the only real democracy in the Middle East today. This time it was in Sydney. These high school and university students were marching against a nation defending itself against the barbarity of Hamas. And when a lone man holding an Israeli flag appeared, well, guess what happened? Yep, New South Wales police bundled him away.
You're holding my hand. Take your hands off me. I will walk down. I will walk peacefully. Do not touch me.
We've seen that before, haven't we? And we saw all sorts of disturbing and sometimes comically clueless antics in the Melbourne protest yesterday. Here are kids yelling Allahu Akbar in the middle of the Melbourne CBD before blocking traffic. And of course, there were the all too familiar cries of "from the river to the sea," a call that would see the elimination of the only Jewish state.
Security were left scrambling as Melbourne Central was occupied. Kids packed every corner of the main foyer, surrounding an image of a watermelon, a symbol that shares its colours with the flag of Palestine. Fresh from class and many still in uniform.
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
But don't you dare suggest these kids should be in school. No, the TikTok generation understand the complexities of Middle East politics. Just ask them.
Well, I think teenagers are quite savvy in politics. I think those adults that aren't really well versed in politics should maybe pick up a book, because I certainly have. And I know that with my knowledge, that I'm doing is right.
And then there was this student in Melbourne who declared, I think Hamas are doing a good job. And she also said, I don't think Israel should really exist. We won't show you the footage. She is only 16 years old. She is in Melbourne. Imagine if you are a Jewish student at a school she attends. This is why I wrote this week that Premier Jacinta Allen failed a test of leadership on this issue. The Victorian Premier should have been clear in stating that students should not be taking part in divisive, ill-advised political rallies during school hours, whether it's pushing catastrophist climate change prophecies or protesting against Israel. Children shouldn't be skipping school to become the useful idiots of political activists. But instead of delivering the simple message that school kids are expected to be in school on a school day, Premier Jacinta Allen initially defended the rights of students to protest on consecutive weeks. She said, being able to come together and hold a rally, a peaceful rally, depending on the issue that you're concerned about or the issue that you're exercised about, that's a fundamental principle of our democracy that must not and should not change. I mean, what a mealy-mouthed response at a time when real leadership was required. Under pressure, the Premier did this week moderate her position, but the damage was done. Now, if these kids feel that strongly about this issue, then surely they can protest after school or on the weekend. After all, we've had pro-Palestinian rallies, I should call them anti-Israeli rallies, every weekend in Melbourne and Sydney for the past 6 weeks. Good leadership requires strength and moral clarity. And on this issue, Premier Jacinta Allen has displayed neither. Now, a little later in the show, I'll be speaking to the brilliant Douglas Murray about kids marching for Palestine. And Douglas is also keen to talk about the Pope's shocking comments about the conflict in Gaza. But joining me now to go over the day's top stories is former President of the Victorian Liberal Party, Michael Kroger.
Rita, how are you?
I'm well. Let's start with Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill. She's had a shocking week. She's had to perform several backflips. She was forced to admit she had no idea how many newly released sex offenders were actually wearing ankle monitors after they were released from immigration detention. And today we've learned more about the arrival of the first asylum seeker boat in 9 years to reach mainland Australia. Well, Opposition Leader Peter Dutton had some thoughts about that.
People smugglers have heard that we've got a weak Prime Minister. They've heard that he's watered down many of the policies that the Coalition had in government, and they've heard that he's disbanded Operation Sovereign Borders. They've watered down many of the policies that we had in place which stopped the boats, and now, once again, the boats have started under a Labor government.
Claire O'Neill has a crucial portfolio, the Home Affairs portfolio. Is she up to the job?
Unfortunately, she's not, nor is Minister Giles in immigration. Look, these are not issues for Labor. Labor are all at sea on this type of thing, excuse the pun. These people have no idea about how to deal with this. These are hard issues. They've failed terribly during the Rudd years. That was a total disaster. And we're seeing it out on a micro scale playing again today. So, I don't know, sooner or later they'll get a group of ministers to go around to Dutton's office again and ask him how to fix this problem, I would think, Rita.
Well, they accepted all 6 of the Coalition's amendments after Claire O'Neill said, no, this is the legislation.
Correct.
She is supposed to be one of the better ones, but you keep hearing from insiders that she's capable, she's one of the future...
Who are you talking to?
Well, obviously all the wrong people. But who do you see within Labor who actually believes in border protection and could do that role?
Well, usually the centre-right ministers are more, reliable on this type of thing. Albany, but it's a hard left government. It's a socialist left government. The best minister so far has been Don Farrell, the Trade Minister. He's the standout minister so far. But there have been some very poor performers. That's before you get to Tony Burke and Chris Bowen.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about Chris Bowen later in the program. Now, to an incredible story. Steve Price touched on it just shortly, briefly, I should say. I can't believe this is happening in the Australian media. This shows you how broken things are. The Australian reports that the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, that's the Journalists Union, as well as key figures from outlets such as the ABC, Guardian, Nine Media, They've endorsed an open letter calling on Australian journalists to commit to applying the same professional scepticism to information from the Israeli government as it applies to information from Hamas, a terrorist group, Michael. I mean, this is astonishing, even for the leftist media, to have this call to treat information from the Israeli government the same way you would treat it from Hamas, who rape, torture, slaughter children, women, burn entire families alive. I mean, how can you possibly make that call?
Well, you can only make that call if you are a hard left journalist who shouldn't have any place in, media organisations that purport to be, independent. I mean, this is like saying a generation ago, we treat the British and American and the Allies commentary on World War II the same way that we treat information coming out of the Gestapo and Nazi Germany. We treat the American views on Al-Qaeda, the American views on ISIS, the same as we treat any press release from the ISIS Health Ministry or the, Al-Qaeda Health Ministry. This is really a sickness in the left and the Australian media that is extremely concerning, and good on the Nine editorial leadership for banning these reporters who signed this document, because it shows they are completely on the wrong side of history.
Well, yeah, that is an interesting development. Nine has said that anyone who signs this letter will not be reporting on the conflict. I think that might cause a few issues in the newsroom. We'll see. But staying on the media, remember the sketch comedy show Little Britain? They used to have a ongoing sketch about the only gay in the village. Yep, that was him. Well, you could write a sketch about the only conservative at the ABC, except Tom Switzer is quitting his national radio hosting role. He'll finish up at the end of the year. The man dubbed the lone conservative says he wants to step down to concentrate on his role as executive director of the Centre for Independent Studies. Michael, how can we have a mammoth media organisation, taxpayer funded to the tune of more than $1 billion a year, and yet it doesn't have conservatives leading its programs, any TV, radio programs? It has a charter. It's required to have balance.
Well, the ABC's been in breach of the law for years by not having balance, and as I said before, this has happened under the watch of Ita Buttrose, who's been hopeless. I mean, they've treated Ita Buttrose and her board with contempt. And the board should be doing something about this. They should be, when I was on the board, the management used to say these are management issues, not matters for the board. Well, the board have a statutory responsibility. They're in breach of that responsibility to ensure impartiality and a lack of bias in relation to the way news is gathered and reported. And for as long as she's there, which is not much longer, Ida should do something about this, because losing Thomas Switzer, who's star reporter, star at what he does, is a big loss for the ABC. But they need a lot more people, not just Tom, to be at the ABC to give it any type of semblance of balance. It's completely off the rails.
They are so fat. You compare them to any other media organisation that has had to, change dramatically to survive. Well, they don't have to worry about that because the taxpayer just keeps giving them $1 billion plus every year. Now, let's go to the UK. Suella Braverman, the UK's former Home Secretary, she was dumped by the Tories. Well, she posted this today. She said, today's record migration stats show we've let in an extra 1 million people in just 2 years, a population equivalent to Birmingham. The pressure on housing, the NHS, schools, wages and community cohesion is unsustainable. When do we say enough is enough? I mean, this is worth talking about, not just because what's happening in the UK and they've got all sorts of uncontrolled illegal immigration, but the numbers Australia is bringing in when we've got a housing crisis, where we've got the same issues with our health system and other services. When are we going to actually have the big debate about population in this country? Well,
I think in due course, Peter Dutton will have to come out and say immigration has to return to pre-COVID levels, a couple 100,000. The years of having 450, 500,000 people in Britain, 1 million in 2 years, these are unsustainable. We don't have the infrastructure. I mean, we just don't have the hospitals and the schools and the community services to deal with these types of immigration levels. And of course, it's putting massive pressure on the housing system. builders going bust. We're not building enough houses, and of course you can't ever build enough houses when you have immigration levels at these record highs. So sooner or later, the Dutton opposition will have to come out and say enough is enough in Australia.
Well, I've proposed that every general election we get a vote. We have a plebiscite on the big issues, consequential issues, and I think population is one of them. And it's something where both sides of the political spectrum seem to ignore the Australian public and what they want, because the polling on this is quite clear. Michael Kroger, thank you so much for your time. Now, the Australian reports Energy Minister Chris Bowen will be ambushed at the upcoming UN Climate Change Conference over his renewables-only vision for Australia. We're an international outlier in the green energy space because we refuse to take advantage of nuclear reactor technologies, unlike the US, the UK, Sweden, France, the list is long. Joining me now is geologist and author of Green Murder, Ian Plimer. Mr. Plimer, Professor Plimer, I should say, why is Chris Bowen so stubborn about something so crucial? We need nuclear energy for baseload power if we're going to go down this renewables road.
Well, Chris Bowen is a puppet of the unions. The unions are big investors in solar and in especially solar, but also in wind. The unions benefit financially from that. Why let your mates down? Open the door. Let your mates have a good go.
Well,
typical Labor. That's the way Labor works.
Yeah, well, it is typical Labor, but we are sitting on the world's biggest reserves of uranium. We export it all around the world. And the fact that our citizens don't get the benefit of that, I just can't understand how an energy minister could be so reckless. Now, let's talk about media coverage. Nine News went into full scaremongering mode with a recent weather report. Let's have a look at what they presented earlier this month.
An alarming report from climate scientists this morning. They warn our planet has entered uncharted territory as we go into what is expected to be the hottest year in more than 100,000 years. We're joined now by Kate Creedon, who's been looking at the data. Kate, welcome. What do we know from what scientists have found?
Well, Davina, it's pretty alarming information. These scientists aren't holding back, warning life on Earth is in danger. The team, made up of climate scientists from around the world, published a report in Bioscience this morning revealing 20 out of 35 planetary vital signs are now at record extremes, which they say is worse than anything humans have ever seen before.
Oh, good Lord, Professor, that sounds terrifying. Life on Earth is in danger. That's a direct quote there, and that report went on for some time. No wonder little kids are terrified and have climate anxiety if they catch reports like that.
Well, I'm about to slash my wrists. I mean, I'm terribly frightened. What I really worry about is kids don't know that there are cycles of climate. And 125,000 years ago, we were in an interglacial. It went on for longer and it was far warmer than the current interglacial. But since that time, we started to cool and went into an ice age. We came out of that 14,700 years ago. We've come into another interglacial. We've reached the peak of that interglacial, and for the last 4,000 years, we've been cooling. And during that cooling period, we've had slight periods of warmth, such as the Minoan warming, the Roman warming, the medieval times, and now. And we've had periods of cooling, such as in the Viking times and in the Little Ice Age. So if someone says the world is warming, and this is the hottest time ever, then you've got to say since when? Because we've been warming since the Little Ice Age. I mean, what would you expect after a Little Ice Age? Would you expect it to freeze or warm?
Well, they were saying ever, and I think that was also the figure of 100,000 years. So is that accurate in your opinion?
No, it's misleading and deceptive. It doesn't tell you that there are cycles where you get cycles of warming and cycles of cooling. And they went back to the last warming cycle, which was longer and warmer than now. But if you say this is the hottest day since records have been kept, well, you've got to say, well, it's cooled down since the time of Jesus. It's warmed up since the time of the Vikings. It's cooled since medieval times, and it's warmed since the Little Ice Age. This is total meaningless scare campaigning, and you can get away with it because kids now don't get an education. They get an ideology just thrust at them, and these kids have not been taught to think critically. What these kids should do is really ask simple questions if they're told that. Show me the evidence. What's happened in the past? Why can't we use the past?
Now, we've got some live pictures there from the Israeli-Gaza border. If there's any developments there, we'll take you there immediately. But just to finish up, Professor Plimer, I spoke earlier about New South Wales Police Minister Yasmin Catley. She's being under attack again. She seems to be stuffing up on multiple fronts, but she's been accused of inciting a climate protest at a Newcastle coal port. There's going to be a massive protest there this weekend, and she applauds the protesters for going and says that climate change is an important issue that needs discussing. This protest is going to block all ships that are carrying coal for at least 30 hours. That's their plan. What do you think of this protest and the police minister's response?
Well, the police minister should arrest people who are demonstrating, and then when they're incarcerated, they should be fed no products from coal or from oil. See how they go. This is just anarchy. These people are blaming coal, which is a wonderful substance. It's brought us from being peasants into the modern age, and these people want us to go back to being peasants. Now, no one has ever shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. So if you burn coal and create carbon dioxide, we should be cheering. I'm a bit too rotund now to be hugging a tree. However, I do my bit. I put out carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that's plant food. And that's wonderful for the trees. Currently in Adelaide, we've got the Clipsal V8 supercar races. They're burning fuel like you wouldn't believe, filling the air with carbon dioxide, and Adelaide loves it. All the trees are saying, yum, yum, we're getting food. These people are unbalanced. They're anarchists. They are breaking the law, and they should actually, if they really were serious, they should actually live life with no products from coal, no products from oil, and see how they go without food that is shifted from our farms into the cities. See how they go without transport. See how they go without medicines. See if they can survive living in their cave, hunting and gathering.
Professor Plimer, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Don't go anywhere. Still to come, Douglas Murray on the political tides changing in Europe, and a bumper edition of Lefties losing it after this break. Welcome back. Every week we speak to one of the finest thinkers of his generation, the author of international bestsellers including The War on the West, The Strange Death of Europe and The Madness of Crowds. Douglas Murray, you're in Israel. Let's start with the temporary ceasefire and the release of 50 hostages, women and children kidnapped by Hamas. Israel will release 150 Palestinian prisoners convicted for a range of crimes, including stabbing, attacks against police officers. This is a painful but necessary exchange for the Israelis.
It is very painful. There is some debate in Israel about how necessary it is. Everybody wants the hostages home, but there's a recognition that what Hamas is doing is a form of water torture of the Israelis. They are saying that in a couple of hours, in the time of speaking, they may release a number of the hostages that were stolen on October the 7th. The identities of those aren't known publicly. It's meant to be a prioritization of the many children who were abducted, but we already know that many of the children who were abducted are not on the list of names to be released. And yes, for every one Jewish child to be released today, the Israelis are swapping 3 Palestinian prisoners. That is, as you say, people in Israeli prisons for carrying out horrific crimes. And the problem with this, the added sort of kicker about this, is that Israel has seen this before. More than 10 years ago, there was a soldier, Gilad Shalit, who was kidnapped by the Hamas, and he was held for a very long time, and he was swapped by the Israelis for over 1,000 prisoners in Israeli cells. One of those prisoners was the Hamas leader Sinwar, who actually planned and carried out the attack of October the 7th. So everybody knows that the lives of every innocent child is priceless, but this is coming at a huge price.
Now, Douglas, we have seen student-led pro-Palestinian protests in Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide this week. You've written, when it comes to Palestine, the kids aren't all right. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, I was once again not surprised, but very much shocked again by the protests you describe. It seems to be a generational issue. There's data to show that now, that where older people in Australia, America, and Britain, for instance, side with Israel in its fight against terrorism, younger citizens of these free Western democracies seem to be on the side of the terrorists. And it's really quite remarkable. I say that, obviously there's some of the malevolent actors and the ones standing there in their kaffirs and things as we watch it are doing a form of terrorist chic on the streets of Australia. Mm-hmm. But there are also many other people at those protests who I say would perhaps 30 years ago have been at a protest for free Tibet. Remember that, Rita? You and I
yes.
remember that. The days when if you wanted to signal that you were a good person, you said free Tibet. And, it turned out that Tibet remains doggedly unfree. The Chinese Communist Party really turned out not to bow to the pressure of a few Devon-based sandal wearers. And they continue to repress the people of Tibet and to hold it. Of course, the situation with Free Tibet morphing into this generation has Free Palestine is that the Free Palestine call is a genocidal call. The Rivers to the Sea call is a genocidal call. And so, as I write, I hope these young people never get what they actually think they want. If they want a two-state solution, they should say so. But that's not what they're saying. They are talking about a Jewish-cleared Middle East, and that seems to me to be something they may well come back to regret having called for. But yes, it's a sort of chic thing, it seems, in this younger generation, in the same way that Free Tibet was. But there's one other difference, which is important to state, which is, of course, one of the reasons that Tibet is not free is because the Chinese Communist Party is not vulnerable to students in Melbourne chanting. The Israeli government is, of course, a democratically elected government. It is actually vulnerable to national and international pressure when it grows. And so, this isn't such a benign call as even some of the better people taking part in these protests might imagine that it is.
And it just shocks me that they don't say anything against Hamas. They don't say anything about freeing the Palestinian people from these terrorists of Hamas who've... it really is depressing in so many ways, because they are just on this decolonisation, stolen land, the West is illegitimate bandwagon, and they've just slotted this issue in there. Now, I'm interested in your take on Pope Francis, who has been reported as saying that the Gaza conflict has gone beyond war. He said this is not war, this is terrorism. Douglas, there's also some conjecture about whether he also used the word genocide. But the comments, as reported, to me are astonishing. He's both siding this. He's also talking about, we can't go ahead with passions, which in the end will kill everyone, talking about both sides of the conflict. What do you make of his comments?
Yeah. It's not that surprising from Pope Francis. I'm not a Catholic, so I don't mind criticising him as much as some of my Catholic friends do, albeit everyone seems to be rather disappointed with him as a pontiff. Yes, as you say, it's a both sidesism. There has been terrorism, and it was what was done to Israel on October the 7th. Israel has retaliated by trying to destroy Hamas. The Pope should be an expert in relatively straightforward moral delineations. The delineation between, for instance, actively trying to kill civilians by running into their houses and killing children and babies and parents, versus the terrible, but inevitable byproduct of war, which sometimes comes when the Israelis try to kill the Hamas leaders and Hamas fighters and sometimes kill innocent civilians. It's quite a straightforward and very basic moral difference. That is it your intention or is it not? The intention of Hamas is to kill civilians. The intention of Israel is not to kill civilians. It's to kill as absolutely few as possible. So it's just very basic moral delineations like that you have to be able to do. I mean, again, the difference between Israelis, where it was Israelis, being gunned down as they asserted their right to just dance or be with their families on the Shabbat, versus people asserting their right to hold rockets and other munitions under a hospital and then put civilians on top of the hospital in the hopes that your enemy will bomb the hospital. I mean, these shouldn't be complex moral delineations for anyone to be able to make. And the fact that the Pope is struggling with them is a very worrying sign, principally for Catholics worldwide who deserve better.
Well, he does appear to be the first woke Pope we've had. We also learned this week that Pope Francis has a group of trans women making a monthly visit to his Wednesday general audiences. They're given VIP seats. So, that's an interesting development right there. Now, moving along.
Unexpected coalition, Rita. But they all like dresses.
Yes. Well, there you go. There is something they can talk about. Now, moving along from that issue, we've seen some terrible unrest today in Ireland with the riots following the stabbing of 5 people in Dublin, including 3 children, allegedly by an illegal immigrant. Police have not yet ruled out any motive, including whether it could be terror-related. Douglas, the politicians and police have condemned the riots and blamed hooligans and the far-right agitators, but you don't have to be far right to be pretty upset by what has occurred and the weak response from authorities.
Yes, I mean, the extraordinary demonisation of the public by these politicians and others is quite something. It's appalling watching people riot like this and burning down cars and buses, particularly in Dublin, where everyone has memory of that sort of thing happening in not too distant memory. Ireland, by the way, it doesn't seem to be a country which needed a fresh ethno-religious conflict to be inserted into it. But there we go. The brilliance of the politicians of this generation have managed just that. Yes, the demonisation of the public reminds me of just so many times this has happened before. There was in Liverpool earlier this year a schoolgirl propositioned by an illegal migrant. Local parents who saw the footage of this happening, and there'd been another assault on a local girl. Local parents went to the local asylum centre and protested, and immediately had all of the press from London and everywhere else coming up saying far-right Nazis in Liverpool. I said, it isn't. Maybe there are some nasty elements in it, but mainly this is parents who don't like the sexual assaults of their daughters. How about that as an explanation? And the same thing with people in Dublin. People in Dublin seem to be understandably irate at the random stabbing of civilians, including children, in the middle of the street in Dublin. And the way in which the politicians keep trying to say all the people who object to this must be far right, etc., etc., it is just a part of the problem, Rita. I mean, as you know, this has a result. If you keep dampening down public anger on these sorts of very basic issues, rape of children, anti-stabbing of children. If you try to dampen down abhorrence for such things, what do you get? Well, across the continent, we got another reminder of what you get. You get parties elected to government which were called far right only a few years ago. And now everyone's going to have to change their language because like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands and like Giorgia Meloni in Italy, these people are coming to power. So maybe those scarers saying far right will stop having the effect that they had. I suspect they will.
Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Great pleasure as always.
Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start Lefties Losing It with a pack of climate cultists from Just Stop Oil getting some fact-based criticism from a learned gentleman who gives them a much-needed reality check.
What do you mean Just Stop Oil? All your stuff is made out of oil, you idiots. Your clothes, these jackets, they're all made out of oil. What the hell are you doing here making a nuisance of yourselves? It's a joke. What a joke. What are you doing here? Get out the road. You're wasting everybody's time and petrol. All these guys, their engines are running all the time, wasting more bloody oil, you nutters. What is this made out of? What are your clothes made out of? How did your clothes get here? They got here by oil. What are you doing? This makes no sense at all, Just Stop Oil. You haven't thought about this. If you want to stop oil, you need to stay at home and go and live in the forest.
No, they haven't thought about it, have they? They're a pack of frightfully ignorant ideologues, and their unhinged antics have little to do with concern for the environment. Now to Melbourne, where students skip school to lose it in the streets and shopping centres of the Melbourne CBD. Let's have a quick look.
Security were left scrambling as Melbourne Central was occupied. Kids packed every corner of the main foyer, surrounding an image of a watermelon, a symbol that shares its colours with the flag of Palestine. From class and many still in uniform.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free! We wanted to come here and show that, we're only high school students, and even we know what's wrong, and the government isn't doing anything.
No, they may be kids, but surely they've heard by now that the river to the sea chant is a chant for genocide, for the end of the only Jewish state. Also in Melbourne, the kids were chanting Allah Akbar, which is adorable given how proudly secular many of these lefties claim to be. Now to a disturbing clip of a mother who is obsessed with her newborn baby being gay. No, really.
Gay baby, it's a gay baby. Gay baby. Gay, gay, gay. Please be gay. Oh. Okay. Be what you want to be, but be gay. Okay? Thank you. Right? No pressure. No pressure, but pressure.
That poor child needs a feed and a new mother. Did you hear the feeble voice in the background of what I presume was the father saying, be whatever you want to be? Really? That's all? That's all the intervention we're going to see from you, Dad? Do better. Now, you know that disturbing clip would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. In fact, it was so crazy that something close to that was in a Hollywood comedy. Let's have a look.
But wait a second, you are the baby's father now, and you chose to dress that baby up in a T-shirt that says what?
Gaby.
That's not the baby's name, is it?
No, I gave him like a traditional African name.
So what's the baby's name?
OJ.
I'm sorry, that film is Bruno, and I've seen that scene like 10 times. It's still funny. Now to a lefty losing it on UK television. Here's Kay Burley's opening question to the Israeli government spokesman about the hostage release. Look at his expression as she asks this crazy question.
I was speaking to a hostage negotiator this morning. He made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas has promised to release, as opposed to the 150 prisoners that are Palestinians that Israel has said that it will release. And he made the comparison between the numbers and the fact that does Israel not think that Palestinian lives are valued as highly as Israeli lives.
That is an astonishing accusation. If we could release one prisoner for every one hostage, we would obviously do that. We're operating in horrific circumstances. We're not choosing to release these prisoners who have blood on their hands. We are talking about people who have been convicted of stabbing and shooting attacks. Notice the question of proportionality doesn't interest Palestinian supporters when they are able to get more of their prisoners out. But really, it is outrageous to suggest that the fact that we are willing to release prisoners who are convicted of terrorism offences, more of them than we are getting our own innocent children back, somehow suggests that we don't care about Palestinian lives. Really, that's a disgusting accusation.
Just incredible how you could ask that question and the logic behind it. And I'm sure the Israelis would just love to release, I don't know, 1,500 Palestinian criminals just to stick it to the Palestinians. I mean, that is how crazy that question was. My goodness. Look, you know what? I've got to wrap up Lefties Losing It because we could be here all night. And I want to bring in my next guest. Don't go anywhere. After the break, Melbourne personality and professional mediator Mick Gatto is embarking on a new project. It's a departure from the usual. He'll join me in the studio next. Welcome back. Now, many would know Mick Gatto as a great survivor. He's a boxing promoter, professional mediator, but his latest venture is a departure from all that. As a founding member of the Equal Access for Autism Foundation, he is now working alongside his wife, Cheryl Gatto, to raise awareness for autism. With their grandson Dominic on the autism spectrum, Mick and Cheryl are two people acutely aware of the challenges facing the neurodiverse community and those who support them. Now they're planning a family fun walk, which they're calling Laps of Love, to take place at Victoria Park in Abbotsford on December 3. Mick Gatto joins me now. Thank you so much for coming in. This is very different to what people would expect from you. Obviously, it's a cause that's close to your heart. Tell me about your grandson, Dominic, and some of the challenges he faces.
I probably should tell you how it started first, I guess. You know, I mean, my wife is the founding member along with me, and she suggested one day that, I've raised millions of dollars for charity, and why not do something for autism and our grandson and leave some sort of legacy and help them when they get older, because there's not much help from when they get older. And watching him grow up with all these, challenges that other children don't have, it sort of prompted us to sort of do something about it. And that's what we plan to do, and this is all about raising awareness, what we're doing at the moment, and
Well, tell me about some of those challenges. You've made a point of saying this walk is going to have an environment where those who are on the spectrum can feel comfortable walking. There's going to be consideration of some of the concerns they have so they can walk with their support network. Why is that important?
Look, because every child on the spectrum is different that has autism. Some are runners, some are climbers, some are screamers. There's all different types, and the last thing you'd want to have is putting on a function or doing something, an event like this, and having something go wrong or someone getting hurt or whatever. And that's the reason that we fenced off the whole of Victoria Park. We've got security guards. We've got many helpers that are helping with different areas there just specifically for this reason. And like I said, they'll have their support workers, or like you said, that'll walk them around the park, and their parents will be there, and they can sort of, have a good day and be in a safe environment.
Now, you've recently had support teamed up with the boys from Sushi Mango. They're massive at the moment, Australian comics. Tell me about some of the support you're getting from celebrities and just everyday Australians.
Look, I'm very lucky. I've raised, like I said, millions of dollars for different charities, and I've had a support network now for 30 years, and people in the building industry, builders, business people that have supported me all the way along. And whatever I do, they support me. Whether it be boxing or charity or poker, whatever it is, they support me, and whether they like it or don't like it, they do it just to support me. And I really appreciate that.
You're a persuasive man, Mick. That's the
not
question.
really. I don't know about persuasive. I think really, everyone likes to help, and especially when it's something like this, everyone wants to do their little bit and hope to make some sort of difference.
Absolutely. And you've said you've raised millions. I remember you were heavily involved with muscular dystrophy charities.
Yeah, Jerry Lewis, we raised nearly $2 million there, 1.6 or whatever it was. Yeah.
Great work. Now, switching gears, there's talk that the Albanese government is thinking about raising the bar for children with autism to access the NDIS programs they have on offer. What are your thoughts on those proposed changes? Should the bar be raised to access the NDIS?
I don't think it should be raised because, in fairness, all them people that are getting that support that have children on the spectrum, if a carpet's going to be pulled from them, and it's going to leave them in a very bad situation because they're not going to have their speech therapists or their therapy classes or whatever they're doing, and that creates meltdowns with autistic children. I mean, there's nothing worse than seeing a child having a meltdown, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I believe it'll create that, and I know some people that know Bill Short, and they say he's a good man, good politician, and if he could keep things the way they are and not pull the carpet on these autistic families and their children, it would be fantastic, and just try and find another way.
Now, the money you're raising with this event on December 3, what are your plans for it? I've hearing about an indoor playgrounds you're planning to build?
Yeah, no, look, we're not raising money. This is costing our foundation a significant amount of money to put this on. This is all about awareness.
Awareness, okay.
And it's about giving...
But how are you going to build these projects?
Well, I was just going to finish about this. We're not raising money for that. But anyway, the projects, sorry, Rita, the projects, the playgrounds, we've got a fantastic board. And as I said, me and my wife are founders. Everything that happens goes to the board. It's a not-for-profit board. Peter Marshall, the Firefighters Union's the chairman. We've got fantastic people like Earl Setchers from the Plumbers Union, lawyers, accountants, all on board. They make the decisions what we do. But what we're hoping to do is get an indoor playground with indoor friendly or autistic-friendly playground equipment, and therapy rooms and things of that nature, autistic-friendly toilets, for autistic adolescent children.
Fantastic. Mick Asher, like you said, I think this is going to be an enormous part of your legacy. You're going to leave behind something that's really valuable.
We're going to give it our best shot. And I'd just like to add that anyone that wants to come, all they've got to do is download or go on Laps for Love.
Laps for Love.
Actually, it's
we'll put the details up on the screen.
It's equal access for autism.org.au. Sorry, and follow the prompts. If they can't do that, just come on a day. We've got facilities for
we've got all the details up on the screen. Show up and do your part. Raise awareness. Mick Gatto, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'll be back after this break.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Here's the latest episode of Please Explain, and it's good night from me.